He has a single issue lobby behind him. And that lobby represents enormous Jewish financial power here inside the United States and around the world. The Israeli goal is very simple. Let's balkanize the region. If they can balkanize Syria, if they can balkanize Iran, if they can balkanize the Arabian Peninsula, if they can balkanize Egypt, they'll do it.
Let's face it, there's a problem with America and Donald Trump's attachment to Israel, and that doesn't come as any surprise coming from me, but that's also coming from Douglas Macgregor, who briefly served under Trump in his first administration. So let's get his take here on what this means in relation to our foreign policy. Can we stop the trajectory we're on? And why does this connection make so many Americans suffer? Let's get his take on it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Everywhere I go, everybody I talk to says, what a disaster. Doesn't matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain. Doesn't matter what you try to do, no one will change or reform healthcare. Doesn't matter what you do. I mean, just go down the list of all the issues that are important to Americans, healthcare, inflation, and so forth. Who's doing anything? And the answer is nobody does. The guy who is a genius at this sort of thing, at convincing everybody that something's happening when it isn't, is, of course, Donald Trump. But Donald Trump's also on some fragile ground right now because he's promised a lot of things. He said a lot of things, and we can go all the way back to before he was elected. I can end this war in Ukraine in 24 hours. I can end it on a phone call. Yeah, but this is somebody who doesn't study anything. He doesn't really listen well to briefings. He becomes bored. He likes to be the smartest man in the room. And if you can convince him he's the smartest man in the room and whatever idea you came up with is really his, he's going to do it. He likes that. So I don't know how much longer this goes on because I sense that people are beginning to say, I didn't vote for this. This is not what I wanted. Can't we get back to the original agenda, which, as you and I discussed at the beginning, is America focused? Now, he has something, though, that we don't. He has a single issue lobby behind him. And that lobby represents enormous Jewish financial power here inside the United States and around the world. And they will do anything to commit all the military power and resources of the United States to whatever Mr. Netanyahu wants.
I mean, that's the sad truth, and that's beyond Trump, but Trump is the most pro-Israel president that we've ever had, other than Netanyahu, who, acts as America's real president most of the time, it seems, right? But he's right. No matter who you vote for, you get this policy because the lobby is so deeply entrenched regardless of who you elect. The bureaucrats don't change. AIPAC doesn't change. Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and their incentive structures don't change. Same with the banks. And he's right. Trump, you get the sense that he's never read a book, and he is beholden to what people around him are able to tell him while coding and coaxing and massaging his ego while sharing, their preferable neocon course that he adopts like Lindsey Graham does. That's why you see Lindsey Graham in every interview saying, thankfully we have a president now that means business. And what he means by that is he's willing to bomb and entertain the notion of regime change in Venezuela, in addition to the war versus Iran, in addition to continuing to fund Israel. That's just what we have.
That's a big advantage. But even that might not turn out to work too much longer.
Well, that's a very important point, actually. The Times of Israel said just a couple of days ago that this recent trip, 2 trips to Israel by Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio, were specifically to babysit, which is what they called it. Donald Trump has been publicly angry at Bibi Netanyahu over the past week or two, and has even taken to threatening him. I think that's exactly what we should be doing. We should be threatening Benjamin Netanyahu. But do you think anything will come of that over the long term? I think we have, my own personal belief is that we have bent over backwards to support the Israelis to the point where it has actually hurt American national interests.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. First of all, props to John Kiriakou. He's a hero. He's a CIA whistleblower that blew the cover off CIA torture methodologies under the Bush presidency. Suffered immensely for that. Spent some time in jail for that, by the way. But I don't think that Trump's hatred toward Netanyahu is something that, actually plays out in terms of policy ever. When it's displayed, and maybe he does dislike Netanyahu, it's hard not to. I couldn't exactly blame him if that's true. He's still too attached to the Israel lobby to do anything that would diminish the power of Netanyahu. That's why you see him, oh, I'm so upset at Netanyahu for breaking the ceasefire in the 12-day war with Iran, and then nothing ever happens. No aid gets withdrawn. No leverage or threats to withdraw any aid ever happens. Ever. When Israel bombed a U.S. ally, Qatar, no problem. I'm going to act mad and get him to apologize over the phone and have a big media production showing him doing that. And, that shows I'm so upset at Netanyahu. And this is 4D chess to undermine the Israel lobby, as some of his faithful adherents say. No, it's not. It's actually illusory, and no changes will happen.
So have we seen enough of this pandering to the Israelis, or should we expect more? And this is not specific to Donald Trump. The Democrats are at least as guilty as the Republicans are.
I think two things. First of all, and I said this yesterday, I think I was talking to Judge Napolitano and then later in the evening to Matt Gaetz. I don't listen too much to what people say in Washington. I try to watch carefully what they actually do. We've heard these kinds of statements before. Let's be frank. Anybody who's spent any time with Bibi Netanyahu doesn't walk away in love with Bibi Netanyahu. It doesn't matter. What matters is, what do they actually do? You and I, look, I don't know what your track record is. I freely admit that I have supported the Israelis for years.
Oh, I did. I did for years.
Okay. Well, I was always an advocate for helping them defend themselves. Mm-hmm. But within 2 weeks of the Gaza business, it became pretty obvious to me that this didn't have anything to do with defending Israel.
Totally agree.
I had been down at the headquarters, at the Israeli Defense Force headquarters, that is responsible for the Southern Command. And I can tell you that they had a grip on Gaza that was absolutely beyond anything I've ever seen anywhere else in the world. If someone picked up a cell phone out of millions of people and said something, they knew about it. If there was someone that took a shot at someone across the the zone, tried to shoot an Israeli soldier in a tower, bang, they knew who that was instantly. So when this happened, I was very suspicious because it just didn't track with my experience. Shin Bet, the Mossad, and the professional leadership of the Israeli Defense Force, too competent. Where was the reaction force? Where was the instantaneous alarm, that should have risen? Then we find out about the Israeli women who were part of an intelligence cell who say they reported this over and over and over again, well in advance, saying something's coming, this is what we've seen. Then you have the Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence in Egypt. And of course, the Egyptians have always been very wary of Hamas. And they said, we see a giant attack coming from Hamas. What are you doing to get ready for this?
Yeah, I mean, people will call this conspiracy. They always will, right? But there is documented proof of this. We have that indication here from this article published by the BBC. This same story was published by many prominent organizations, too, in the legacy media, including the BBC, the Times of Israel, Haaretz, major publications in the United States, that Egypt tipped off Israel to this attack 3 days in advance. Of course, the Israeli authorities are saying, that this is absolutely false. There was no actionable specifics in this. We didn't know where it was coming from. But if you're skeptical about that, how couldn't you? Because Netanyahu was going to go down for fraud and corruption charges. They had them all lined up. There was a big schism within the Israeli government and Israeli politics in general about Netanyahu and his wrongdoing in that regard. And it's not just that. Times of Israel reported that Mossad knew about this a year in advance. So this is not just some kooky pipe dream. It's very likely that Israel, at the very least, looked the other way at this. And, they've gotten everything they've wanted when it comes to eradicating Palestinians since then. About 100,000 dead. The U.S. joining into a war with Iran, which really is the crown jewel of their Israel First Greater Israel project, to suck the U.S. and our resources and preferably our boots on the ground to regime change that country, just like we did in Iraq and Libya and Syria to some extent in the latter case. That is what they want. They want our boys on the ground dying for their Israeli empire. That's exactly what they want. This is of no benefit to the United States. It's so maddening that, you have to talk about it this way, and so few people really study this, but that really is what we're up against right now.
So I finally walked away and said, this was designed to trigger this larger campaign against everybody in the region that Israel wants to destroy. And they saw this as an ideal opportunity to drag us in. And we have willingly walked in. I don't see that ending anytime soon. I think it's going to continue until we are hurt in some way. And I know that sounds awful, but until we are actually hurt, there's not going to be any support. I mean, Churchill had this problem in 1940. I remember when they bombed the shipyards in Glasgow, the docks. And Churchill came in and said, thank God. He said, otherwise, we'd never have any of the Scots on our side in this war, because the Scots, they lost a lot of people in the First World War. And they came back and said, what did we do this for? When were the Germans the enemy? I mean, the English were different in their attitudes, but in Scotland and Ireland, that's a very different attitude. So when they bombed the place, Churchill said, this is wonderful. Well, I kind of get the impression that hasn't really happened for Trump and the Israel lobby.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. That is what they're hoping for. It's actually to their benefit that United States troops get killed in the Middle East. I mean, that's the sad truth. That's where the incentive structure of Netanyahu is, to draw the U.S. more into this. And that's why my biggest fear, and it still remains a fear, is that there will be a false flag attack on troops in the Arabian Peninsula, in Qatar, or the UAE or other places where there are troops stationed to draw the U.S. in, and there'll be a new propaganda campaign for it. In World War II, the U.S. preceded Pearl Harbor by a sanctions regime against Japan, starting from 1940, eventually cutting off all oil by 41. And there's a lot of evidence, a lot of scholars have talked about this, that Roosevelt looked the other way at that bombing, wanting to draw the U.S. in. He had already set down Lend-Lease policies. The U.S. already was involved through proxies in that war. But you're seeing the same thing potentially play out again in drawing the U.S. into a broader Middle East conflict. It's just something we should never accept, we should never want. And that's why it's a mistake to even have U.S. forces in the Middle East in the first place. It's just a result of empire building. It's not a result or a, duty of the United States to do that to spread democracy. No, the U.S. sides with Saudi Arabia too. One of the most cruel, autocracies of the world. It's a kingdom. They dismembered Jamal Khashoggi. Like, that's where we're at here. It's not about democracy.
The opposite could happen, though. If you do get a lot of Americans killed somewhere, they'll try to spin it, but it's going to make a lot of people here angry.
And what do you think this means for the Saudis? The backdrop to all of this is the Abraham Accords, the Abraham Accords, the Abraham Accords. Every single time somebody mentions whatever peace deal, it has to include the Saudis. The Saudis don't seem to be in any rush to recognize Israel. And when push comes to shove, what do the Saudis really get out of a relationship with Israel? I'm unable to identify anything. And I spent most of my adult life in the Middle East. What do you think about this?
I suspect that their interests are purely financial.
Yeah.
And they won't do anything that could disrupt the flow of cash into or out of Saudi Arabia. They've already begun to take precautions in other kinds of ways. The Chinese have now opened a gold vault in Riyadh. They've got another one in Hong Kong. Now, this is separate from the Shanghai Gold Exchange. This is designed to facilitate transactions across international lines. So as a result of this, the Saudis are now selling oil in yuan. And they're buying things from China in yuan. We're going to see a lot more of this in the future with BRICS. This is just the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big concern. And that's something that Trump is exacerbating by slapping secondary tariffs on India, by the way. 50% punitive secondary tariffs on India, a country that could have potentially been pried away from BRICS. Instead, Modi is now closer than he's ever been to Xi Jinping and Putin because of the way that the United States treats people merely for having the gall to trade with Russia. I mean, it's just so absurd. And then we get into a war with Iran, also a BRICS country. Help overthrow the regime in Syria, also a BRICS country. Flirt with regime change in Venezuela, an aspiring BRICS country, not an official one, but they want to be. I mean, it's just incentivizing this BRICS alliance to develop an alternative currency that may eventually be the reserve currency of the world. And that's the biggest disaster imaginable for Americans. And I'm so surprised, Sophie, you are talking about it, but that is the groundwork that Macgregor is laying here.
We've anticipated my next question, too. But go ahead and finish your thought.
No, it's just that I think the Saudis are very good at playing both sides to the middle. They don't want to invite trouble from us and Israel, but at the same time, they're prepared to jump ship quickly as needed. And they're going to enjoy a certain amount of support from the Chinese and probably also the Russians and others as a result of doing so. Iran has already jumped ship. We know that. And the Israelis, are interested because we're interested in disrupting all of this. The Israeli goal is very simple. Let's balkanize the region. If they can balkanize Syria, if they can balkanize Iran, if they can balkanize the Arabian Peninsula, if they can balkanize Egypt, they'll do it. Because in their judgment, when all of these peoples are fragmented and divided and ideally killing each other, then Israel wins and Israel is safe. I'm not sure it's going to quite work out that way in the next few years, but that's certainly the goal. So if you look at Saudi Arabia right now, I would say they're going to migrate in the direction of what profits them. Now, there's always the outside possibility that no one is considering, and that is that the peninsular Arabs decide to overthrow their ruling elites. That's not impossible because the ruling elites right now are really unpopular.
Yes.
I'm surprised Sisi is still where he is in Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
because my perception of our Egyptian friends is they are furious beyond belief.
Interesting. We'll have to see if that happens. Remember, there was a lot of allegations that might happen in 2009, I believe, the so-called Arab Spring. And I think Saudi Arabia is in it for the money. They have this tightrope walking situation between them and the Arab states, and then on the other hand, with Israel and the United States. I mean, they benefit from the American blockade of Yemen in their diehard war against Yemen in the Yemeni civil war. The faction that they supported, did not win out. It looks like the Houthis will remain entrenched in power there. Ansar Allah is the official name of that government. By the way, Israel assassinated half of it a few months ago, barely made headlines, but it's just what Israel does, assassinations all over the place in the name of empire building and hegemony with the United States. It's just what they do. But if there were any time I think the Saudis would peel away from its alliance with the United States, it would be soon, because, they've retreated from Yemen. They don't seem to be dug in on that war anymore. There's officially a ceasefire. I think it was brokered with the UN in 2022. The U.S. is still, participating in starving children there, right? Because 500,000 have died because they're contracting diseases, not allowing them to get basic medicines through. But this whole relationship with Israel just causes all these domino effects that are never beneficial to us. There's just no benefit to it. You can't derive anything from an average American about what benefit we get from here, and it's all negatives. We send them billions of dollars when we're in debt. We join into their wars when we shouldn't have any wars, when we should focus inward. And, I know a lot of people that watch this are left-wing dissidents or right-wing dissidents. You might have totally different prognostications and prescriptions for how to fix America's domestic woes. But in either case, I would always favor any of those over just sending it overseas to war so the banks and the Israel lobby and the military-industrial complex can benefit at our expense. When Israelis, purchase healthcare for its citizens, they tax the hell out of their people to do that. But a lot of how they get away with that is just relying on being bankrolled by the United States for their defense. And by defense, I mean slaughtering innocents in Gaza and getting into war with their Arabian neighbors. So I think Macgregor's right here. Very good to see this conversation between him and Kiriakou. And, Trump's attachment to Israel's dangerous. These two debated a little bit that, the Israeli relationship between Trump is not really that different. With Kiriakou even saying it might have even been worse under Biden. I just don't think that, actually. And I'm no fan of Biden whatsoever either, man. But, Trump recognized the Golan Heights. Trump moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Trump signed the Abraham Accords. Trump shredded the JCPOA. Trump is the one that joined in a new war, American war against Iran. I think Trump is by far the most pro-Israel president ever, and that's a pejorative in my sense. He boasts about that. He pretends that's an amazing thing, right? Boasting about how close he is with the Adelsons, too. He never denied their requests. He openly talks about this. It's just so vile and atrocious, but that's how I see it. But I want to hear how you see it. Let me know in the comments down below. What are the worst ramifications of this attachment that Trump has, our entire political class? Where do you see it going from here? Let me know in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to John Kiriakou. Like I said, total hero. So glad he has a channel now and interviewing awesome people. Check that out. Also, if you like this video, please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you do that, click the join button below. You can help support me, and in return for that, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. Also, if you want a free copy of my book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll take you to a site. You'll plug in your email, and I'll send it right to you in PDF form. Like I said, free of charge, no obligation. That tells the story of how America started empire building, departing in a long sense from the original intent of the founders. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.